Looks like Eva
I'm
might have a question. Jackie, I just saw that Eva
Oh,
might have a
hi.
question.
I'm just letting you guys know I am working on getting my video up and running. So I'll hopefully be on, with my face in just a moment.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thanks, Ava. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm opening the April meeting of the VOREC Steering Committee, and my name is Jackie Dagger. I'm the program manager for the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative. And I just wanted to open our meeting by saying we're trying something new. I sent you all sort of the idea and format for this meeting ahead of time, but we are following our meeting in February, kicking off these bi-monthly business meetings. And the plan is to hold these as spaces where we can connect bi-monthly this year so that we can open up some more space to work on or do our work on the implementation of Move Forward Together Vermont. So we will coordinate more on the implementation work for Move Forward Together Vermont over email. I let you know that I am planning 2 more in-person meetings this year, looking at July and December. So just so you're all aware that those we'll be coordinating on those, but not directly in this meeting. The format for these business meetings is going to be pretty flexible. The intention was not to create a rigid agenda because we want to create as much space for you to connect as possible and for us to connect on Vermont's outdoor recreation economy. So, like I said in my email, you're encouraged to prepare ahead of these meetings, think about emerging trends, interests, challenges, and upcoming events that your partners are planning for and you're thinking about. And so you can highlight anything you want or that's really important when we come together in these business meetings. So today the focus, and I may do this occasionally where I set a focus for the meeting. And today I've set a focus to coordinate and connect on recent federal activity. We're aware of outdoor recreation partners in Vermont really feeling the impacts of pauses and reductions in federal funding and staff, tariffs, reduction in Canadian visitations, as well as increasing brand boycotts. And the landscape is changing very quickly. So today our goal is to really understand what's changing a little more clearly and start to brainstorm around how VOREC, as this collective impact network, as a support for the outdoor recreation economy in Vermont, how we can provide assistance as this landscape continues to change. So in a moment, I'm going to turn the floor over to you to share your thoughts. It's going to be very flexible. I'll look for raised hands and people unmuting to chime in. But before I do that, I just want to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items. So we're not going to do our introductions today, but I do, when you chime in, please go ahead and share your name, your organization, role on the steering committee, so we can capture that. We are going to hold a few minutes at the end of the meeting for anyone who's not on the steering committee listening in who might have questions or comments. We'll try and do that around 11:55 this morning. And then I have one sort of housekeeping reminder for you, and just looking ahead to June. Many of you have term endings coming up at the end of June. And I just wanted to remind you about that. If you are considering moving on from the steering committee, please reach out to me, Becca, and Heather as soon as possible to let us know. And on that note, we do have someone who will be transitioning June that we know about already. Mike DeBonis has let us know that he'll be moving off of the steering committee. And Mike, really just want to thank you for your time being on this steering committee. We've benefited so much from your contributions here. And before we jump into the meat of the conversation today, I really just wanted to turn the floor over to you to say a couple words, knowing that you're not going to be able to join us in June.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be part of VOREC for the last 8 years. Thinking about it, it was an idea, this spark of an idea that Drew and others had, and to see it go from that initial spark to something that has achieved what I would consider very meaningful outcomes for Vermont communities and our sector is just really special. And you don't get many opportunities in your career to see something go from a spark to something that's, an engine really revving on all cylinders and achieving outcomes. So yeah, 8 years is a long time. And in my own business at GMC, I think turnover is good and getting new voices in is also good and healthy. So I look forward to having someone else come in and represent the sector. And I look forward to continuing to support the work, outside of VOREC, but in my role at Green Mountain Club. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mike. 8 years, long time.
Thanks,
Seriously.
Mike.
It really is. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Mike. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to you, and we've done quite a bit of setup. I am also just going to drop into the chat in the email I sent out ahead of this meeting. I kind of provided some categories or buckets, I would say, for organizing our thoughts around the impacts that we're seeing from federal activity. I'm just going to go ahead and drop those in the chat in case they spark any thoughts for you all. And yeah, I'll turn the floor over to you, looking for raise hands or folks unmuting to share thoughts. Jeff, go ahead.
I'm not going to shy away from being first. So just a quick update on where we're at, what we're doing here at Vermont Adaptive, but I'm also going to give a quick perspective of things I've seen in the industry. We're heading out to the International Trail Symposium next week to present on our accessible trails work here in Vermont with a pretty sizable contingency, which is pretty cool. So we'll be out in Madison, Wisconsin speaking there, and then in 2 weeks after that, we'll be in Park City at the Move United Education Conference talking about our economic impact analysis for adaptive sports programming and users. And we've just received a few emails this morning from folks that the word on this economic impact analysis is getting out. There's really only one that's been done in the United States right now, and it's more event focused. So this is going to be more of a programming focus of who's coming to the state and where they're coming from and how much money they're spending. So we're getting a little traction with that. As far as emerging trends, though, I know the Canadian market is quite large here in Vermont, but I think the next market beyond that is the senior market. I'm seeing an awful lot of seniors on fixed incomes that are quaking in their boots and they're not going to go anywhere this year, and they're kind of back down. So, do we focus some kind of energy into the senior market of whoever's a gas tank away from Vermont in that respect, since it is a cheaper journey and the health benefits of getting outside. So just wanted to touch on that aspect.
Thanks, Jeff. That I haven't heard much about the senior market in all of the conversations we've been having, so I appreciate that contribution. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Mike, for everything you've done with VOREC. Really appreciate that. I just wanted to talk just briefly about the tariffs and the impact, which is anticipated on small businesses and particularly small retailers. I don't know what the level of, we're all learning a lot about tariffs every day, and I don't really know what the understanding is out there on this call right now, but essentially, if you're making things offshore in China right now, a week ago it was everywhere, but in China, when your goods arrive at the United States and arrive at the ports here, you have to pay those tariffs at that point. And so while you may have thought they were going to cost one thing when they left China. You could be facing bills in the hundreds of thousands and the millions of dollars that you didn't expect. And so what will happen is some brands will eat that, and because they don't want to, screw over their retailers, other brands will go to the table with those retailers and try to renegotiate those costs. And as this goes on, the unpredictability of the tariffs is going to change what people order, and it's going to limit things, and it's going to really be a trickle-down effect of negative stuff that, the bigger brands and the bigger retailers have some leeway, but the smaller brands and the smaller retailers are going to really struggle. There's no doubt about it. The small outdoor shops, the combination of that struggle with the small outdoor shop plus the decrease in tourism is really going to put them in the crosshairs of becoming an endangered species. And I do think that being aware of what this could do to downtowns in some rural areas is worth considering. Add in uncertainty around public lands and things like that. It just is. I think it's going to hit every sector in a challenging way. I think the outdoor sector is particularly vulnerable for some significant changes, and not positive ones. So I know it's kind of a doom and gloom kind of approach, but people are trying to. I've had numerous conversations with a variety of size brands, a couple conversations with retailers. People are really nervous about it. They're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the phone to ring, people to fire them. My own business is certainly vulnerable to this as well. It's talk about what can VOREC do. It's a great question. I don't know if we can really do anything on the tariff front. I think leaning in on what we can do around public lands is probably the best, most effective use of VOREC, though I would also put out there if there's a way to, yet another support small businesses, support small independent retailers, support Vermont brands. I mean, all those things would certainly be helpful, but really whatever we can do would be great.
True. And just one follow-up. I am curious, you bring this additional perspective in your business with like media, and you did say like your business is vulnerable to tariffs as well. I feel like that's a perspective I haven't heard as much about, and I'm curious if you could elaborate on that just a little bit.
Well, I mean, my business, I'm a consulting business, in the same way that a sales rep is working with multiple brands at a time. Generally speaking, I'm working with multiple brands at a time, representing them to the media. And, when you're, the perk of being a consultant is you can kind of own your own time. But the downside of being a consultant is it's really easy to get let go in a very short term. When there's, for instance, when COVID hit, my business lost about 60% of our billings in an 8-day period. And it puts you in a very uncomfortable spot, and fortunately some grants were made available to keep a bunch of people afloat and alive. And I think sales reps, when you look at that category, New England and particularly Vermont has I think the highest number of sales rep organizations in New England. These are all small businesses, employed in very much the same way, where they have a contract with a variety of brands that they're representing, and if those brands struggle, and they start reeling stuff in, the first things to go are consultants. That's what happens first before they start making layoffs at a company. Hopefully, none of this will happen, but I think there's a lot of a lot of similarities out there. When people are, as I like to say, midweek drinking is back. We're trying to hang on there and keep a bright face on it. But at the same point, we're trying to be realistic. Our job is to do our job, but it's also to feed our families and be a part of our communities and things like that. So, from a media perspective, I think there's also a considerable risk out there. Many media people are freelancers. There are very few staff writers for any publication anymore. And we have a number of freelance writers and contributors and content creators in Vermont who are all on contractor contracts as well. So, just something to keep in mind, and this is not unique to Vermont in any way. I think everybody's doing it. I do think, having listened and read a lot of outdoor industry news on this topic, it's the huge majority of it is what's happening at the national level. And I think elevating the struggles or the opportunities to lean in at the state level would certainly be a positive thing to add to that conversation, because I think a lot of other states are trying to figure this out as well.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, and I'll add to Jeff's note about the International Trails Conference next week that the Confluence of States is co-convening there, and we do intend to have a conversation about federal activity. So my hope is to elevate some of the ways states can be leaning in on this as well, and particularly from our experience in Vermont.
I would
see a
say,
lot of
Jackie,
hands raised.
I just want to add in, not only is the Confluence of States likely to be having that conversation, it's largely an impetus that emerged from the forum earlier this week that Kelly held, and really understanding that there was a call to action. And one of the best ways we might be able to respond to that was by, having you reach out to your colleagues across the country and think about ways that you might be able to activate there. So I think, yet another example of how we can leverage VOREC as a means to feel like we're doing something about the situation.
Thanks, Becca. So I see a lot of hands raised. I know Kelly might have some additional thoughts to add to what Drew shared. Heather, are you prepared to speak more about like the tourism perspective? Should we go to Kelly first, or?
Happy to have Kelly go
Either way.
first. That's fine.
Let's have Kelly go first, and then I'll go to you.
Okay, yes, thank you for letting me contribute to this and echo everything that Drew said. Similar themes that what we've been hearing. I did just put in the chat a draft report that we've been working on this week. It's been evolving every day, and it will be finalized Monday at this point in time. But generally, between conversations with businesses one-on-one, we've been able to have some forums which have been really helpful to bring the industry together and really hear from the various parts of the sector how they might be uniquely impacted, what they're experiencing currently, what they anticipate experiencing, or how they are navigating it with strategies or what resources they could use to help. So the two hearings in the State House this week, with one on tariffs on Wednesday, of which Burton Outdoor Gear Exchange, Renowned Skis, and Vivo testified. The wonderful visitor economy hearing yesterday, where Abby, and she can share some of her thoughts, and Jay Peak spoke. And then our forum with businesses, and we have another gathering with Senator Welch on Monday, a small group with other sectors. But a lot of these roundtables are trying to take all of the swirling information and really try to summarize it, compile it. And I think that an important role for us to take at this point is to really be that navigator and to try to cut through the information and really organize it, and then match it up with what our individual constituencies need and how we can be helpful. I think the tariffs are a major one for the sector. I guess out of the list of impacts between trade visit, as Jackie outlined, trade, visitation, boycotts, plunging consumer confidence, supply chain relations, funding cuts, and threats to our public lands and diversity. They're all really hitting different parts of the outdoor sector, from manufacturers to retailers to resorts to events, media, marketing, and nonprofits. And so we are seeing an impact in each part of the sector in some way, shape, or form. So it's hard to kind of summarize. I think that I think what we can, without going into the details, and there are some stories in here that we've gathered through surveys, and some of the comments from businesses were from prior to the pause of the tariffs. And so a lot will change, but it just goes to show the initial anxiety, the angst, the kind of decision-making that businesses are trying to do right now. But back to like, what do we have control over? I think this navigation role in really trying to help businesses and organizations understand what's happening, because they have very limited time to sift through everything, or maybe trying to have a news diet or a LinkedIn diet for a bit of time so they can do their business, or they can just take a break. But the other thing is really thinking through how contingency planning can help for whatever unfolds from here. A lot of businesses are thinking about what they can cut, their employees, their marketing budgets, their programs. I think nonprofits are doing the same, and that's, was no exception. That we want to think about, if there is a reduction in our financial situations in the future, how can businesses be best prepared for that? And then in the short term, where they are having impacts, how can they counter that? Where if it's an event director that's seen a 30% reduction in Canadians signing up for their event, and they know there's a boycott, what can they do to think through other markets for their event, or communicate to Canadians how important it is that we would love to host them here in the state. Other businesses around that are already being hit by tariffs that are in place, how can they think through their supply chains, or communicate with and to negotiate with their suppliers or the retailers that will inevitably have to take some measures. And then how, again, do we communicate to the consumers to let them know what is happening, and to build on the relationships that we have to support buying local, to support the companies in this time, and really try to work together as a collective. So there's a lot more there, but I'll just stop with that summary.
Thanks, Kelly. And thanks for sharing that summary. Heather, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm happy if people have followed for Kelly. I think we started kind of just lining up to speak, but if somebody wants to jump in, I'm happy to give that space.
Yeah, we also have the chat as well, since I know there's a lot to get to, and we can throw things in there as well.
Okay, well, in terms of what we're seeing, as Kelly mentioned, we had, Visitor Economy Day at the State House yesterday. And again, thank you to everyone who was able to be there. On the visitation front, unfortunately, some not so great news to share this morning. We just got the latest from Stats Canada. So I think people remember the original statistic of the drop in return Canadian visitors returning to, but what I'm trying to say, by car was down year over year in February, 23%. Year over year in March is now down 32%. So another huge decline. Obviously that was a huge topic yesterday for folks. I guess another sort of perspective I wanted to share though was, I've been traveling the last 2 weeks, and I just came, so I was at an international conference earlier this week, and that was with international tour operators and international media. And I would say that some more heartening kind of perspectives from those meetings were, one, that the international media, now this is travel focused, so not specifically on the manufacturing and some of the tariff issues, but in terms of perception of the US, folks are definitely worried, but they're not scared stiff, so to speak. Like, I think there is a little bit more nuance in that people understand that the US is not a monolith. And what we're seeing is that the major drop in bookings is for places like Las Vegas, Texas, Florida, and so forth. And the reduction in, again, overall in the country is not hitting New England as much. And I think that's to our credit for our values forward, that people know that we are different. So granted, these numbers we're seeing at the Canadian border are very distressing, but just keep it in a bigger context. The week before I was in DC, did have some meetings with the congressional delegation as part of an advocacy day with US Travel. Just in terms of how this group can help, certainly everyone's looking for what is the data, like what is the hard data that we can bring to the congressional delegation on impacts. Seems like VOREC could be a place to convene that. I know that folks are sharing that. Otherwise, Kelly, I know that you're doing that, but just just wanted to kind of reiterate that those stories are really important for us to be able to tell. And what my colleagues around the country are feeling similarly in terms of just this trepidation, but we're all, staying positive in our messaging that, we haven't changed. We're still a great place to visit and so forth. I guess the last sort of thing that I thought was sort of interesting, and I don't know how quite if it's appropriate to be actionable here, but if there's a lot, from the state perspective, we were really looking to US Travel and Brand USA, the national organizations, like, what are you doing about messaging? And one of the things I thought was interesting that they shared was that I think we all know that this is an administration that doesn't operate like previous administrations. And so whereas it might have been in the past, you might be able to accomplish some policy shifts with a, kind of outrage and public shaming to the administration, that does not work with this particular cast of characters. And so they are really concentrating on backdoor negotiations. And I just thought that was worth sharing in terms of, like, we may not see somebody saying something as loudly as we might like to hear it, but that doesn't mean it's not being said. And then I guess finally, I would just add that we have, so far, our federal funds have not been restricted or taken away. We are slow on reimbursements. It is a reimbursement process, so we still have about $5 million at play. So far, like I said, other than delaying payment, they have not said we're not getting them. They are starting to ask more questions. I will keep folks up to date on that. I think that's what I have.
And obviously, if anyone has questions or comments about anything that's being said, please also feel free to chime in or put in the chat. Ava.
I'll ask a clarifying question, Heather, in the chat. I think it's a minor thing.
Ava, go ahead.
Hi, guys. Yeah, I just wanted to shed some direct light on the tariff situation from a retailer standpoint. This is an ever-changing roller coaster. All of our distributors, for the bike industry specifically, our distributors have been emailing almost daily, giving us updates on, their challenges. And what's been occurring is what distributors are currently doing is any in-stock merchandise they have, they are, panic selling. And what that's causing is a lot of panic buying for retailers, basically to get your affordable inventory, get it now before they're impacted by these tariffs. But then with the pause, we just heard from some of our distributors there, the price was going to be raising drastically, obviously. So lots of retailers out there, like I said, began panic buying. But in light of the pause, some of these distributors have paused their price hikes as well. And it's all sort of in limbo. So we're just getting daily communication from our distributors. And it's really kind of waffling, like I said, day to day. It's been challenging, certainly, for getting ready as a seasonal business ourselves. We are a rental business personally, so it's a little bit of a different situation for us. But our neighbors out there trying to have a good retail year this year have actually. A lot of the folks I know up here in Lamoille County have overabundance of inventory due to trying to acquire as much as they can before this price hike. And then we find out the prices are, pausing on that. The distributors are pausing on this price hike. So, and consumers as well, a lot of them are holding out actually on buying. We had a lot of folks lined up to make purchases with our bike sales. I know some of our partners as well, and those have all dropped. So this is an ever-changing situation. We really feel like in a week from now, we're going to hear a totally different communication from our distributors. And just to shed a little light on the Canada piece, I have to say, one thing I've been really tuning into with this situation is the fact that, and of course, I'm very rail trail focused. Obviously, that's my wheelhouse. And one thing we have to keep in mind, especially being in Vermont and having the largest rail trail in New England, is that the Petite Train du Nord, which is only about 3 hours from our rail trail, receives about 1 million users annually. And this generates for them about $100 million annually in revenue. And only 5% of these users reside outside of Canada, meaning 95% of those 1 million users all live in Canada. And this demographic, this community has been chomping at the bit to get to Vermont, to get to our rail trail. They were paused through COVID, and they were ready to travel here. And again, with the border closing, were paused. They were paused again from the flood. So we have a lot of eager Canadians wanting to use our rail trail. And if the Petite Train du Nord is the second largest rail trail in North America. So Vermont and the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail has the advantage of being in the closest proximity to the second largest rail trail in North America, and which generates the second largest revenue of all rail trails in North America. And they were very eager to come to Vermont and use our rail trail. We have had some customers still try to come and actually get turned around at the border. So there may be a lot boycotting, but there's still, like I said, that rail trail community, that rail trail demographic is not necessarily going to boycott us if they can sneak in. And so one thing I've been trying to brainstorm is, how does Vermont use the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail as an olive branch to this community? How do we, speaking of messaging, present a welcoming message to our Canadians using our rail trail? So one thing I've been trying to do, working with other towns and people interested in the rail trail, is to figure out how we can go about some sort of campaign and market to Canada using our rail trail, and being the closest rail trail to this second largest rail trail population in North America. How do we use that to our advantage? In the meantime, in New York, there is a new rail trail in the Adirondacks, recently opened. It's a little over 30 miles, so it's not as, it won't be as desirable, but they have a robust marketing campaign and support around this rail trail. This briefly happened, and they've already gained so much traction and buzz for their rail trail. Again, it's only 30 miles, so definitely not as appealing to the Rails to Trails community. The longer the rail trail, the more obviously popular and desirable it is. But I do think that Vermont needs to find a way to appeal to that demographic, which up until now was very eager to come to travel to Vermont and use our rail trail. And so that's a project I'm working on. I just thought I'd throw that out there, figuring out a way to, have that be our olive branch and get this huge community that generates $100 million in revenue annually in their own country to come and visit us.
Thanks, Ava. I do know we have a lot of comments. I wanted to offer that we can, if folks don't need to run off, we can extend this time. I can stay on as long as we need for comments. So just putting that out there now, knowing that we have this meeting only planned until noon. I want to recognize for Josh that I did get his hand raised, so I'm gonna let him go after Abby. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you. So Sarah Pelkey, I'm the Community Development Director for the town of Poultney, sort of bringing a municipal perspective to some of these questions and regional development. I think what I've been hearing about, from stakeholders and others that are involved in outdoor recreation development with municipalities, is really folks are, there's a lot of planning going on right now. And so Drew had mentioned COVID, and some of this feels like the approach that was taken during COVID. In Poultney, that's when we did all of the planning work for outdoor recreation economy. So those types of projects are happening. There's a lot around creating facilities right now that are happening. So reusing facilities that are existing in municipalities, underused. Killington has a project in motion right now, but I think that's what's happening. And then as part of that, folks get a little stalled in terms of estimating those projects, figuring out where to go. And so, it's incremental approach to that work to continue to move forward and not be stalled out in the current situation that we're in. And then it also, ends up being about supply chain, about sourcing materials for construction, that type of thing, and trouble estimating that. Poultney, we've been asked several times about any federal funding, any grants that we have, that type of thing, and what's happening. We really don't know. It's really hard to answer that question and to pay attention to funds that have been appropriated, or projects that you have planned and try to work in that environment. We do have a current in progress planning project with VOREC. It's the Building Resilient Infrastructure project, and it is related to the rail trail in Poultney. So there's a bridge here in Poultney. That project has been underway, and we've been trying to move it forward towards implementation, but it looks as though it will be stalled probably about 75% of the way through that project. So I'm guessing that many of the municipalities that are hosting that are outdoor rec communities are also contending with some of this. So I think in trying to come up with some actionable items, I think in Poultney, when we had done a lot of this work through the years, it had been incremental. Any municipality that can take on a small incremental project is a way to kind of keep momentum going. And then we also have never had a marketing budget. So planning is our marketing. So if you can talk about, whoever the audience may be, or whoever the group that you're representing, I think to talk about the work and continue to plan and use your planning as marketing might be a way to keep some momentum going in smaller communities. And then the last thing that I would say that relates to this conversation, and specifically to the northern border, and Poultney is located in a place that isn't very easy to get to. So when early on we had a lot of conversations around destination, making it a destination, getting people down this way, and it kind of occurs to me it's very practical, but focusing on the northern border and focusing on the Northeast Kingdom in any way we can makes a lot of sense right now. You go through all the other parts of Vermont to get to the northern border of Vermont, and to find ways to message around it, market, or just drive a positive relationship there, to continue to work towards driving a positive relationship with our neighbors to the north, outside of the federal conversation as best we can. I think makes a lot of sense in terms of some way to be actionable about what's happening right now.
Sarah. Abby, go ahead.
That it was on there. Beautiful transition, Sarah. You set me up really nicely. Yeah, I don't think I have much, anything else really new to say. I have, I think, just as Sarah spoke, the emphasis is a lot on those border communities, and the Northeast Kingdom our entire economy is reliant on Canada. And so in my view, I can only speak for Kingdom Trails. I can't speak for all the other trail networks in the state, except from what I'm hearing anecdotally with Vermont Trails and Greenway Council. But a lot of the smaller mountain bike trail networks, at least, are really serving those immediate communities. They're not at the level of a destination like Kingdom Trails is. And 30% of our membership revenues are Canadians. And it was even greater before COVID. We've finally been able to tick back up to that. But at this time right now, I cannot balance my budget. And I have the boards voting on it next week. And that's because we're projecting a decline. And what's really scary about all that is I don't even know what to project. We don't even open till May. And then right off the bat, it's Victoria Days, which is usually that's really going to be our teller. And if they don't come on that weekend, then, May and June are when the majority of, that's why I think it's also heightened, is we're a seasonal business. We're only open a few months out of the year. And there's some major months in there that we receive all of our revenues in. And so the impacts, that the ramifications of these tariffs and what we're hearing, it's not even about that, it's the threat to their sovereignty. And this is the only power they have, is to not come and to boycott and put pressure. And so if they don't show up in May, then those ramifications are the lasting impact that KT and the Northeast Kingdom will have is going to be 5 years. That's it's extending to decisions. We talked about grants too, are impacted at the federal level. We're wrapped up in USDA grants for a huge infrastructure project for a hub in order to serve our trail users and our community. And if our numbers decline and we don't have the same amount of folks coming to serve, then what's the need for a hub, a new welcome center, and what's the need for more parking areas and that supporting infrastructure, or the need for the staff to support them? And so the decline of all that, of the trail user numbers not being welcomed as they have in the past, just the trickle effect from all of that is, we're abandoning huge projects that have been in the works for the past 6 years. And that's, even going on USDA. Right now, our grant's okay, but I also know 12 of the staff members at USDA that I've been communicating with for the past 3 years are no longer there anymore. And so, there'll be delays and hang up of some of those reimbursement funds. So I guess just bracing ourselves and having to make some really critical decisions, and almost decisions on a micro level. And the only power we have is messaging, as Sarah was just saying. Is it even worth my time to be marketing up in Canada? Probably not now. I need to spend those minimal dollars I even have at where I know there'll be some sort of return. But what we can do is message at least that we're here, you're vital, you're always welcome at Kingdom Trails, and we cherish your friendship. And then that hope is just that, I think someone used the word olive branch at some point. Our hope is that gentle, kind messaging is received and understood, and that they do come. So I just don't like that. We just don't know. We have no clue.
Viva, I'm going to go over to Josh, but do you have a question for Abby before I do that?
No, I was just going to give one quick little positive note that I can say we do have a lot of Canadians already booked to come to our rail trail. And as of yet, none of them have canceled. So, we're waiting. And I just wanted to throw that one positive. I did forget to point that out, that we so far have not had any cancellations from our Canadian reservations. And we are also still getting reservations from, we work with a lot of travel agencies, international travel agencies, and we're still getting reservations for this summer to use the rail trail and do our tours. And those are still coming in. So I did want to throw that positive light out. No cancellations yet from Canada, and still getting some reservations internationally.
That's great.
Great feedback, because that's not what we're experiencing. We do get the emails and phone calls every day that they're not coming. And then the lodging areas surrounding KT are getting cancellations.
And this is just where I think that rail trail piece is a key. And of course, I'm always going to advocate for the rail trail, but it is really, I think, going to be a vital olive branch. Like I had used that word before. I just want to reiterate that, because that's a huge demographic, and like I said, very eager. I speak with them a lot.
Thanks, Ava. Great. I want to get to a few other folks who haven't gotten to chime in yet, so I'm going to go to Josh. Go ahead, Josh.
Hey, everybody. This is Josh Ryan. I'm the founder and principal of Timber and Stone LLC. We're a trail design and construction business based in East Montpelier. And as of 2021, we've focused solely on our work projects here in Vermont. Quick shout out to Mike DeBonis. I hear you on the 8 years. Nice work. I just want to remind, I think we're all everybody on this call and everybody listening is somewhat on some form or another a leader in their industry, their sector. And I think how we as leaders handle this says it sends a lot of, shockwaves out there to the people we employ, to our customers, to our clients. And, it's an uncertain time, but I think that each day, a gentle reminder, take a big breath, say things that you mean, and make really good decisions. And so I've been kind of wedged in that for the past few weeks at minimum. And I like the reference to COVID, because I actually just talked to my crew 2 days ago about how my brain just kicked right back into COVID time, where I was like, holy cow, is my business going to go under? Can I still employ these people? And what I was reminded is to be steady, but I was also reminded that I had massive retention of my staff back then, and I'm having massive retention again right now that started, a year plus ago. And I share that because I think that people need and want stability. And if we provide as employers those opportunities and those that arena, a lot of positive things can happen. And so with that, what we're experiencing is price volatility on steel, gravel, trucking, fuel, equipment purchases, truck purchases, lumber. I mean, it's out of hand. But these are projects that I and other trail builders are building right now that we signed a contract a year ago or 8 months ago. So what do? I mean, you complain to the client and say, I need more money. They don't have it. So you try to figure out ways to find compromise with clients. And that means making less profit for sure. Just trying to break even, pay your staff as much as you possibly can to allow them to afford what's going on at home and have them stay and continue to work with you. So we've just, I'm learning. I mean, I'm not a businessman. I don't even have a degree in it, but, as many of you know, we just finished our 20th year. I seem to be enduring a lot of different things, and we're still here, which is great. But at the end of the day, I mean, when you have a $700,000 contract with the state of Vermont and materials just went up 10, 15%, what do you do? Like, there is no playbook for that. So, I'll end there, but I appreciate everybody's collective wisdom and the opportunity to share our experience.
It's Josh.
Yes.
All right. Yes, we can hear you. I'm curious, I don't see any other hands raised, but I know and I see Fraser, great. If there's any questions, conversations, other solutions that this conversation is bringing up for you, please feel free to chime in and share those. And Fraser, I'll go to you.
Thanks, Jackie. And thank you, Mike DeBonis, 8 years. Congratulations. Couple comments. I actually tried to put them in the chat, and for some reason, my chat wasn't sending, which I'm sure is on my end. So I'll try to figure that out. But I am just finishing up 20 years on the leadership team at Orvis, and one comment I wanted to make there, specific around tariffs, is there's a lot of uncertainty there. We all know that things are shifting every day, but I have maintained strong relationships there, and it is very clear at this point that the tariffs could actually create a scenario that was more impactful than COVID was for the business. And so it's a bit of a soundbite, but it's pretty significant, and it kind of gives us a perspective on what I would consider a medium-sized retailer in the country and a large-sized retail for the state of Vermont. Secondly, I sit on the board of the Outdoor Industry Association, and so here as well, very focused on tariffs. I'll be with the Outdoor Industry Association at the end of April in DC, lobbying. Kind of similar to Heather's comments, our strategy is to seek a place at the table with this administration versus alienating this administration, which I think would be easy to do. And so the things that the Outdoor Industry Association is doing right now is thinking about ways to take action. And, I think some of these could potentially be applicable at the Vermont state level, but things like sharing your story, the most impactful thing your business can do is share the tariff impact stories with your legislators, advocate. So in this case, OA is suggesting supporting the Bipartisan Trade Review Act of 2025, introduced by Senators Grassley and Cantwell. And then Capital Summit. This is specific to OIA members, but Capital Summit is what we're calling our lobbying day in April in DC. And then if helpful, connecting with trade experts at OIA, which to stay informed and influence public policy, which would require joining the Outdoor Industry Association. But just in terms of some ways to take action, felt relevant to share that with this group. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Fraser. And if there's any way we can help inform like your conversations that you'll be taking to DC at the end of April from this conversation, that might be something, a way that VOREC could kind of help you as well in those actions that you're already taking. So maybe there's a action item for us to connect on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this conversation, just generally hearing from everyone, has been super informative for me and helps to give me perspective as I'm heading there. But certainly, Jackie, happy to connect and hear any other thoughts.
I feel like this Kelly's report, stories like the one that Josh shared, understanding of what's happening both with, pricing and with tariffs, could be really helpful in addition to anything that comes from conversations that Jackie might have with her colleagues at the Confluence next week. It feels like the timing could all sort of come together to help to inform your conversations too, which is good.
All right. Drew, I see you have your hand up and I saw you dropped in the chat that you want to flag an event. I don't see any other hands up right now. So I say go ahead and share that.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to, Fraser just reminded me of, so in mid-June, there's a new outdoor gathering, national outdoor gathering called Switchback Spring, which will be essentially an outdoor trade show in Nashville. The Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance will have a booth at that show with multiple brands being included. And at the same time, the State Outdoor Business Alliance Network, which includes the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, as well as I think they're anticipating up to 20 other people from around the country, will be gathering to talk from the Outdoor Business Alliance perspective about all these issues and more, I'm sure. So that is a really positive thing. And I just full disclosure, I do work with Switchback Spring, but generally speaking, the SOBAN and BOBA parts of that are things that are happening on their own. But that is a positive thing and a chance in early June to talk about a lot of these topics with people going through very similar things around the country.
It's true. We are getting close to our noon time, but like I said, I at least have time to stay on. I don't know what other people's schedules are like. We do have a few folks who haven't had a chance to share yet, and I'm wondering if they might have any other things to add to the conversation we've been having, the impacts that have already been shared. I think, I'm noting Shelby, Frank, Carrie, and Tommy in particular, who we haven't heard from yet. Yeah, Tommy.
Hey, Tommy O'Connor, Executive Director at VASA, and I have the motorized VTGC seat here for VOREC. We're so far not seeing too much with that. We're in a similar spot with Abby, as we don't really know. Our season really kicks off here shortly. Numbers right now for out of United States for wanting to ride trails are pretty similar to what last year looked like, but that's just kind of how things go it's not a lot up front until usually May, that when we get slammed. So we'll know a lot more in May. We haven't seen too much on material and gravel changes yet, but we do have some anticipation of that. The biggest change we've seen, which has kind of already been mentioned, but some of our repair and maintenance costs have gone up. The biggest we did see was we had small parts that just we need on an annual basis just for safety of our machinery doubled. That was the biggest thing we saw. So we're still obviously keeping an eye on that, but we here internally always have conversations of doing our best to buy from Vermont small business, anything like that. So we try to promote that internally as a practice more than anything too. So and I agree with what everybody's saying. VOREC has a great spot and can do a lot of really positive things and have a positive impact. And we want to help any way we can as well. So we're all part of the messaging. So thanks everybody. I know a lot more of you have been hit a lot harder right away. So I may have a different tune in a couple of months when we get some more actual numbers down. So thanks.
Thanks,
Jackie,
Tommy.
the only
Again-
other sort of last thing I would want to share too is from our standpoint, the state, particularly, being an agent for grant making and outdoor recreation, what I can say is that while we aren't seeing the direct effects of pauses on that funding any longer, LWCF is flowing, RTP is flowing. Those federal agencies are seeing huge cuts in staff capacity. Federal Highway Administration went from 6 individuals to 1 staff person already. The U.S. Forest Service is restructuring, maybe looking at going from, as many as 9 regions to 2 regions. National Park Service has lost 6 positions. So it's not looking great as far as the momentum we were building around being able to be effective grant makers and really responsive to communities and nonprofits. It looks like, we're heading back into a phase of this being really challenging for us and, needing to be kind and thoughtful and compassionate with each other as we try and figure out how to navigate this, including, with our federal colleagues that are right at the end of the tail wagging the dog.
Thanks for contributing
Jackie,
that,
I
Becca.
could,
Go ahead,
I'll
Carrie.
just say that everything Tommy said kind of rings true for us. I dropped our stuff into the chat earlier, so I don't have a whole lot to add from that perspective. And my main thesis is wait and see is where we are. Our only immediate frustration is that we need to buy a truck. It's not a great time to buy a truck right now. So, but yeah, it's really just in the holding pattern and waiting to see what kind of impact comes through.
Thanks, Carrie. All right, looking for any other comments. I don't know if we have Becca, your friend on the phone still. I think he might have dropped off, but if anyone else is listening in that wants to chime in, please feel free to ask a question or share a comment. Any other last thoughts before we adjourn?
Keep sharing stories, keep letting us know as things change, moment by moment. I think it'll be really important for us to be able to capture as much as we can and be able to share that up and out. I really appreciated the comment about things happening behind the scenes that Heather pointed out. Like the more we share this information, we more know that these stories, this compelling data and information can make its way into those conversations.
Ellie.
I just wanted to extend a thank you. And I think it really showcases the work that we've all done over the years to have really close relationships, open lines of communications that allow us to respond quickly in circumstances like this. And I feel like Heather and the tourism and marketing team, Tim Tierney and ACDC and Lindsay Curley and the congressional office staffers, so many resources have just been opening the state treasurer has been opening their doors and, helping out to navigate and provide resources and join forums and share their office support teams. And it's just remarkable. And I just feel really grateful that we do have these relationships and this access. And Jackie, just VOREC being like a navigator of the sector as a whole, and being able to really be air traffic control on some of the things that we need to, some planes that we need to land soon, I think is a great role for VOREC and for each of us in our own little domains.
Thanks, Kelly. Well, so I know one next step, I did hear several suggestions, opportunities. We're certainly going to be cataloging, or at least I am going to be cataloging and thinking about those suggestions that were made. Again, I'm heading to this meeting with the Confluence of States next week. I will be bringing the stories and things that you've shared today with me to that, and looking for other ways to lift these up. This is a recording of our conversation today. I'm going to post that on the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation's YouTube channel. We have like a VOREC steering committee panel on FPR's YouTube. So I'll be posting this video there and sending it out through the VOREC email list. So just as a resource for you and also others who might be interested in the conversation we had this morning. Thank you all for joining and coming prepared with your thoughts. It's so useful to have these kinds of conversations, especially amidst the changes, the very quick moving changes we're experiencing right now. So I really appreciate your contributions, and please feel free to reach out at any time to me, Becca, or Heather, with further ideas that come up as we move forward. So thank you all.
Thanks,
Hope you
everybody.
Have a good afternoon.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a
Hang
good
in
weekend.
there.
Bye.
Thank you.